Hello, RoahmMythril here once again, getting back to Magmammal 3, and it's judge commentary time. So let's see what they had to say about the last two stages we just went through in Tier 2, starting with 155th place, Ballade Square of Doom by Madman. 34.8 out of 100, this stage got 10.4 in design, 7.4 in fun, 2.6 in creativity, 4.8 in aesthetics, and 9.6 in functionality, with no penalties. Mick, 48 out of 100. Huh. The level's actually a square. Well, it's a little more of a rectangle, but it's overall pretty close. Outside of that neat detail, this is, well, there's not a whole lot to say about this, but I'm gonna do my best. On the neat parts, makes good use of the helmets from Mega Man 10, besides the one that instantly shoots you as soon as you spawn. Yeah, at least two of those. I think one gets you in the first checkpoint too, and it made me think it was gonna be a running gag for the stage. One particular highlight, mixing Helmet and Wall Blaster 2 with jumping, creating a tighter conflict than what the jumper usually enjoys. It also has some of the most challenging top fiends to Buster only no damage. Pretty sure you need the charge shot. I at least want to say I got through there without charge shots and didn't get hit. It was fairly tight though. But outside of that, the majority of this level is fairly low-key. The gimmick use is small enough I barely remember it, a few concrete blocks that are used to get tokens, and the visual aesthetic seems to get weaker as the level advances, turning from a sunset cave to a generic fortress. Finally, a lot of assets here are only used once. This is fine enough for mid-bosses, but any one-shot enemies could use some additional attention. That also means the difficulty curve never really goes anywhere. It's pretty simple from start to finish. Overall, this is inoffensive and gets a few neat moments early in the level, but as a whole, I can't say I'm sold. Shinryu, 18 out of 100. Well, the square part of the level's title is certainly accurate. I'm not sure if that's necessarily a good thing, though. Having everything condensed into such a simple path can hurt your stage in a number of ways. For one, the actual level structure and progression can end up being pretty boring, as is the case here. Vertical section followed by a horizontal section, repeat once again, then the boss. Also, if it ends up being too short, like with this level, it basically gives you no room to evolve your platforming and enemy challenges. It's unfortunate since I can tell there was at least a bit of thought put into certain things here. The first and last tokens, along with the Komasaburo room, have sound ideas behind them, which makes it all the more frustrating to see that they're confined to such a tiny level with no room to flesh things out. Overall, I think it's safe to say this stage could have benefited from being a lot more than just a square. Patchy, 45 out of 100. Square of Doom! Doom to your eardrums! Otherwise, it's a rather unremarkable level with somewhat uninspired level layouts. There isn't any clear theming with the enemies or gimmicks chosen. Most of them just come and go. There is just this one spot where it forces rush coil usage after the mini-boss fight with the frog since the ladder is too high to reach. It's not a rule that a level must strictly be beatable with Buster only, but it is weird that this one jump alone invalidates Buster only runs for leaderboards entirely. Then there's just a bog standard Ballade fight at the end. Can't say I'm too impressed overall. Flashman 85, 30 out of 100. When the most creative aspect of your level is that it's purportedly shaped like a square, it's time to rethink what you're doing for this contest. Every level should have something that meaningfully and memorably sets it apart from others. I've seen projectile spam. I've seen rising falling platforms over bottomless pits. I've seen enemy rosters full of shielded enemies that fall easily to laser trident. I've seen gimmicks used once and then immediately abandoned. I've seen Ballade in a boilerplate boss chamber. I've seen levels that are functionally spotless aside from an oversight or two. Notwithstanding one screen that nicely combines a cannon with stairs, I've seen every one of these screens before. If not the exact configuration, then a configuration that captures exactly the same essence or intent. And usually, I've seen them done with a better sense of theming or progression tying them together. Something similar could be said of the aesthetics, though I do like the novel and appealing combination of Woodman and Tomahawkman tiles. It'd certainly help to have ceiling shadows and a more cohesive atmosphere, mind you. I almost like the challenge where you use rush coil to grab a ladder guarded by ladder press, except you could achieve the same effect with a lifting platform, which would strengthen the challenge focus and avoid forced weapon use when there's nowhere convenient nearby to grind for refills. From the arbitrarily locked weapons to the meaningless token giveaways to the ambiguous directionality in the final stretch, I don't get any sense of planning or passion or polish from this level. It's playable enough, but what can I get here that I can't get better somewhere else? For example, checks the map, a level that's actually shaped like a square. Ace-Spark, 33 out of 100. Well, the level name almost gets it right. It's certainly square, and there's certainly a Ballade, but Doom, not so much. The first token was neat. Everything else seems like a hodgepodge of random ideas thrown together without rhyme or reason, and it's pretty non-threatening. The fact that the hardest part of this stage is the bit I programmed, Ballade himself, is rather telling. It's also a shame that the level just evolved graphically very quickly. Tomahawk Man has such a nice background and aesthetic, and suddenly out of nowhere, random hot garbage Wily Castle tiles that look utterly hideous. Seriously, the Wily tile sets are resulting in some really ugly looking levels in this contest. Also, I gotta ask, Ballade is the boss, right? Why in the name of Quint does the stage use Crystal Man's theme? That's just weird, dude. So I kinda get what they're talking about, that when your main gimmick is that the stage is a square, it doesn't really leave a lot of room for innovation, because you are just going to be traversing a very repetitive path just going around the border, and depending on the size of the square, you don't really have a lot of opportunity to explore new ideas. Because the thing is, if you want to make the square any bigger, you're adding 4 screens at a time so that the sides expand equally. So, erring on the side of it being too short might have been the better play here. But yes, definitely the most difficult part of the stage was Ballade himself, which a lot of that comes down to that hitbox of his. His operating system must run on FAT32 because that guy's a heckin' mega chonker. So next we had 154th place, Gravaqua 2-0 by Clash Crash. 36 out of 100, this stage got 11 in design, 7.8 in fun, 3.8 in creativity, 6 in aesthetics, and 7.4 in functionality, with no penalties. Mick, 32 out of 100. Well, I'll credit this much, the reverse gravity jet ski was cool. Otherwise, this level didn't really impress. The only outright bad design was the awkward gravity jumps at the start of the stage. The rest of it was perfectly playable. However, there's also a large number of items that are underutilized. Gary is just scenery, and both sheep blocks and gravitons are used once and never again. Even the core gimmicks, reverse gravity and water, don't really do anything interesting. Combine this with a very haphazard visual aesthetic, and this needs a lot of work to be made good. I can play it and enjoy parts of it, but that's about it. Shinryu, 17 out of 100. So initially this level was submitted with a minor typo. The Q and U were swapped. Now that it's been properly fixed up, I can safely say the title of this stage makes a lot more sense in hindsight. As for the level itself, it has some pretty obvious issues right from the start. Everything looks messy due to the jumbled tile usage, which is only further reinforced when the water is suddenly cut off, both visually and functionally, by what's meant to be background tiles. That aside, the stage doesn't have much to offer, as most of the room layouts and platforming aren't all that engaging. What few enemies exist are made virtually non-threatening due to the way they're placed, which is especially true in the wave bike segment. Considering you can get through it by just mashing the fire button without ever needing to jump, along with there being several screens of nothing along the way, the wave bike section felt more like a small time waster than anything. I can definitely see what the intent was here at least. Combining gravity and water gimmicks is a fine premise, and I definitely think it could be turned into an interesting level. The execution just needs a lot more polish. Patchy, 58 out of 100. Understand the title? Actually, I don't understand the title. And I'm not sure I understand this headline. This is a cute stage. Although the stage is obviously quite amateurishly made, you can still feel that the creator had a lot of fun when making their possibly very first Mega Man level, and it's quite a charming sight to see. But alas, I won't go easy with the score in the spirit of judging. The most prominent problem with the stage is the tiling. The exact place where gravity flipping occurs is unclear. The water has no top or bottom sprites. Water ceases to exist upon reaching spots with non-watery background tiles. There's also this weird Thunderbeam pickup at the initial start point that might have been left there by mistake. That's why I started on Thunderbeam. I had wondered about that. I thought maybe I just randomly accidentally hit a button or something. But no, okay, so there was a pickup that just instantly sends you over to Thunderbeam for some reason. Most of the architecture is rather bland. Enemies just placed around without posing much threat. A lot of the enemies also seem to just show up once ever, making the roster feel arbitrary. I like the jet ski session where you go upside down. While it doesn't really change how it plays out if it had been right side up, it was still a pretty fun take. While Gravity Man has the addition of water physics to change up the fight, albeit not by much, Splash Woman is just standard underwater Splash Woman. That being said, that makes me wonder if it is possible in the engine to fight Splash Woman without water, and how that changes things. Musings for another time. Flashman 85, 33 out of 100. Level design is a lot like writing. There are rules about how different elements should be used, and there's a certain structure to how things should flow. It's important to go back and check your work for any errors, ideally getting other people to tell you if what you've crafted makes sense. All of this is to ensure that your ideas are being communicated clearly, because if you don't connect with your audience, then the whole thing falls apart. Both the design and the writing in this level failed to connect with me. Ideas never really develop into anything. Challenges tend to assume the player is already familiar with the enemies and gimmicks, who needs a learning curve, and they either repeat themselves, e.g. water spouts plus spikes, or show some promise before being promptly forgotten, e.g. Sniper Joe. Which is a shame because on an individual basis, the challenges aren't bad in concept or design. Nobita plus wave bike, kinda fun. I don't understand the dialogue boxes. They don't tie in with an overarching narrative, and this level doesn't need a navigator. The silly secret would actually be funnier without the dialogue box. And the text is so riddled with spelling grammar problems that the whole level feels less professional by association. Even the level title looks like a typo. And apparently it first was. Other observations. The graphics lack any style, but they're functional, save for background arrows that don't precisely line up with where the gravity flips occur. Checkpoint placement is acceptable. Hiding a token in front of the energy element is pointless. Make me work for it. The level allows for so much needless backtracking that I once played it in reverse, and that was more satisfying than progressing forward. This level could have been a topsy-turvy collision of water gimmicks with Gravity Man assets and gravity gimmicks with Splash Woman assets. As it stands, it's more like a playable brainstorming session. Ace Spark, 40 out of 100. The idea behind combining these two Robot Master stages was one with a lot of potential, but the end result is a watered-down version of both stages, pun not intended. The one area of the level could have really shined, with the wave bike and gravity gimmicks combined, but it fell flatter than a steamrollered pancake. It ended up being easier than the already easy original wave bike section from Mega Man 5, and the few gravity flips changed nothing about the gameplay whatsoever, aside from making the fish enemy completely useless. Throughout the level, there were a lot of empty screens filled with enemies that only served as decoration. The few enemies and gimmicks that ended up in the player's way only really showed up once, and were never introduced well. The one exception was the repeating water geyser, which was an identical challenge through the whole room. The wave bike and gravity gimmicks are not challenges by themselves, but instead need proper enemy and architecture layout to complement them. The level rarely did this at all, leading to a stage that could be played on autopilot. Failing to reuse any ideas meant the level felt completely unfocused, even though you were constantly reusing the gravity and water features. The graphics aren't badly tiled, but the transitions between water and non-water features were non-existent, and made a few of the challenges quite confusing to look at. It also had odd holes in the water with very out-of-place backgrounds. Yeah, that was definitely something I noticed, and I have to wonder if that was intentional, making it to where if the background gimmicks are there wasn't supposed to be water physics, and that I'm not sure. Because, for example, it made the Gravity Man fight feel a little strange, to how, like, sometimes you were dealing with water physics, sometimes you weren't, and I'm not sure if that was intended or not. Though I do feel like if it was intended, it could have been communicated a bit more clearly than it was. Overall, an inoffensive level, overall, a bit of a rompy stage, but yeah, I'm not sure it really did anything particularly amazing or unique with the assets it was using. Like, I kind of agree that combining water with anti-gravity could have gone a lot crazier than it did. Like, with something like that, when you're wanting to combine assets like that, I feel like you can't be afraid to just lean into it, go as far as you can with it. But overall, still an overall playable stage. So that's where we're going to call it, so thank you very much for watching, I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and I shall see you again next time. Until then, fare thee well.